It's the 2025 Africa Food Systems Forum happening here in Dakar, Senegal. I'm Akin Obake. And on this special highlight, I'll be bringing you key discussions that shaped this year's event and how public and private sector players are coming together to foster solutions to Africa's agri-food systems challenges, and more importantly, bringing youths and women at the front burner of the discussions. So in the next few minutes, I'll be giving you key discussions from these highlights.
The Africa Food Systems Forum 2025, convened in Dakar, Senegal, brought together heads of state, ministers, public and private sector players, and participants in the agricultural, energy, youth affairs, livestock, and finance space. The focus this year is achieving food systems transformation in Africa through entrepreneurship, putting youth and women at the core of the agenda. In these discussions, we look at how finance technology is at the heart of agri-food growth and how the private sector can champion this transformation.
I don't think we'll be able to get a food system transformation without a nutrition transformation. I think people eat, so the idea of actually making sure that you're growing food is ultimately to make sure that we're getting people that are healthier, but also how do we transform this product so that there's an opportunity for enterprising and entrepreneurship across the value chain. I think that's one key message that's really important for me, because as a public health expert and somebody who's new in the agri-food system per se, but still that has been thinking at the intersection of what private sector can do is very important. The second thing is obviously the role of private sector. And also, how do we make sure that we get people to think in terms of food brands, loved food brands, because that's how it works, but also how do you get private sector to really step their game up in terms of not only investment, but the creation of what those jobs are going to be. Because we talk about creating employment for young people, but those young people by themselves, it isn't just the small enterprises, it's creating it into larger agricultural sectors, enterprising that will create the kind of jobs that we're looking for. I think that's the second one that I've come upon. The third one, I think, is not new. The theme of the summit is around young people, right? So what are we talking about in terms of young people, right? So I think what's been very surprising but also very encouraging is how involved they have been in this forum, right? So I mean, right from the opening with 2 presidents and 7 young enterprise entrepreneurs and agripreneurs, and from the agro babe to Muraz and to Maraz and all this, to be surrounded by the leadership, and to say like that is where it really matters, right? So I think for me, what I've seen is that the solutions that we need to come up for the young people need to come from the young people themselves. So it is not us to come up with those solutions, but rather creating this value chain. I think for me, the thing that came up so strongly, it's less about just coaching and giving them mentorship, but actually making cash available to them. So making sure that the capital flow that we're talking about is really reaching them. So if we're going to give them some mentorship and some coaching, it's about how to create those companies so that they're cash ready and investment ready to receive the investment. That's where the investment is, and that's where the potential is in terms of unlocking resources that we need to bring to the table.
Right. As a continent, do you think we are ready in terms of nurturing the next generation of business leaders, particularly in the agri-food sector, and we're referring to youths now and women, in terms of creating that product or creating that strategy to help nurture these guys, to help teach them how to unlock this finance, to help them understand the scalability of their business from the government and the private sector? Do you think we have that? Do you think we're ready?
Oh, I think Africa's been ready a long time. I mean, I've met some young people this week that are so impressive. Africa has been ready for a long time. I think our young people are ready. I think, our women are ready. I think the work is ongoing. I think what's required at this point is to put some of these instruments and learnings that's been going on, for example, in Southeast Asia, into Africa, for example. I mean, things like insurance, making sure that the women are insured, for example. If you look at countries like Indonesia or South Asia, 35 to 40% of women, agriculture would actually be insured. Here, we're talking less than 3%, right? And I think this is where we are, right? So how do we make some of those financial instruments work for us so that we can de-risk some of these things and then we can really make sure that women get a chance to be able to have access to this capital? I think our laws are making it very difficult for these women, for example, to be able to have access because, the collaterals don't belong to them, the land don't belong to them. All these areas in the social environment, it's very difficult for them, right? So we have a lot of norms that are still holding us back. But I think we are ready, and we've been ready for a long time. I think we're not lacking dreams, we're not lacking initiatives. What we are lacking is this capital flow and the opportunity to already giving you ideas on how we aggregate and we scale together. I think the scaling part is where that is. And that's why, for me, my dream is still very simple. And everybody that follows me or knows what I do has been around how do I bring the private sector and brands to the table in a very rewarding way. Because you can't just bring them into public-private partnership without them seeing a benefit for what is it that they want out of it. So how do we make sure that that partnership is rewarding so you can get a win-win-win partnership? Win for the private sector, win for the public sector because you're transforming at scale, and win for the communities that will receive the benefits and be part of this transformation. I think for me that's absolutely critical.
All right, now my next question is one that really would pique your brain a bit right now, and it has to do with unlocking this finance. Like you rightly said, women don't own the lands. They don't own whatever collateral that needs to be put in place. So do you think the bulk of responsibility falls on the government? Let's not forget the same government is in debt in terms of import substitution, subsidized importation, to provide this food. Do you think if that money is channeled from import dependence to actually empowering and providing capital for women farmers and youth farmers in Africa, do you think there would be some level of progression?
I think there will be. I think you cannot anyway have this conversation without government around the table. I think their leadership is super important because they create the policies that enable us to reform what we're talking about. So I think having progressive policies where you're really thinking about women and youth at the center of this conversation will also give some sort of security even for the private sector to create some of these innovative products that we're talking about. What sort of innovative banking products do we need to create that, maybe has less interest rates for young people for a certain age to start businesses, to do the things that we need to do. So I really feel like the role of government in terms of lead, transformer of these societies is critical. It's just not possible to do that. And we've seen that. I mean, look at, seeing, Paul Kagame and seeing the president of Senegal on stage, and I mean you can see the difference, but it makes so much sense because so many of their reforms and policies is what has transformed the agri-food system, right? And you can see that, and Senegal is making a lot of headways in wanting to show that it is possible to be able to have this real revolution around agriculture and being able to bring young people along the entire transformation. And all you need to do is go to the Youth Dome and see the marketplace to see the kind of innovation and activities that exist. So yeah, we need the government. You cannot do this without the government. You cannot do this without the private sector also.
Beyond having a working agri-food systems, driving technology remains pivotal to unlock the opportunities in the sector.
Technology is really important, but finance is also very, very important. And what we're seeing, GAIN works with 8 different countries in Africa on a day-to-day basis, work hand in hand. It's kind of unglamorous work. It's policy work, a lot of it is finance work. And what we're seeing, I was with the Minister of Sierra Leone this morning, and he's brilliant, and he was describing how he and his government have to go through so many hoops to get finance. And what we're trying to do with the accelerator is help governments, first of all, to make the hoop bigger. What do I mean by that? I mean, create more investable opportunities, investable propositions, so that either the external financiers or domestic financiers or the private sector can invest. That's the first thing. So make the hoops bigger, make them more of them. But then second, align the hoops. Sometimes you can develop something that's financeable and a development bank or a equity fund will say, it doesn't really quite fit with our instruments. Well, we need to make it fit. So it's about making all of these hurdles surmountable, reducing the size of the hurdles, reducing the number of them, and helping people to leap over the ones that remain.
Well, let me take a cue from your talk with the Minister of Agri in Sierra Leone right now. And let's look at those countries. Obviously, we know that it's not a one-cap-fits-all situation for Africa, right? There's some countries who are doing great work when it comes to agricultural technology and evolution of the agricultural space right now. And then some countries are lagging behind in that aspect. So what are those key lessons we can pick from these countries that can be adaptable in other countries?
Well, it's really interesting. I've been there was a report by FAO that came out last year that actually identified the 7 or 8 countries that are really trendsetters, leading edge countries: Rwanda, Sierra Leone, Uganda, Tanzania. But I think I've been really struck at this meeting by the Somalia delegation, and I've really been struck because they have been working really hard to change the narrative around their country. And I've been talking to some of the potential investors, and they've been saying, wow, my vision of Somalia was this, but after talking to these guys and listening to these guys, I can see that my image of Somalia is very different from the reality. And I'm really inspired by the government leaders, how dynamic, how purposeful, how committed, how genuine they seem to be in terms of their commitment to development. And I think that's not the only thing that matters, but without that, nothing's really going to work.
We know that Africa is big on agriculture, but we've not been able to harness up to 5% of the agricultural potential on the continent. So how can we change, this crisis to opportunity?
Well, they say every crisis contains the seeds of opportunity. And there are certain people who, the expression is, certain people see a fire and they run away from it, and some run towards it to see what they can do to help. I think we're looking for leaders, and I think it's one of the definitions of leadership is that you see a problem and you see a potential opportunity. What's interesting about what's happening in parts of Africa is that if African leaders and African entrepreneurs can figure out how to turn that risk and the stress into opportunity, I think the rest of the world will come running, because the rest of the world is going to be facing the challenges that Africa is facing right now in 10, 15 years' time. So in a way, it really is an opportunity, and necessity is the mother of invention.
With a youthful population, how can the private sector get Africa's youth to embrace the opportunities across the agricultural value chain?
There's a climate change challenge, which is a challenge of we need to be resilient. We need to make the African systems resilient. That requires different seeds, different practices, but also diversifying crops. At the same time, we have a challenge of nutrition. We need to make sure that we're not just eating calories, but that we're really having a healthy diet. And I'm very, very proud of the work we're doing with opportunity crops. We are bringing groundnuts, chickpeas, millets into the maize-based systems. We all eat maize in Africa. We also eat a lot of wheat in Africa. We want to champion a program for wheat in Africa, where wheat can be planted in Africa, produced in Africa, or bought on the global market, but really that we know what kind of wheat, the wheat quality, that it is right for the consumers in Africa. So CIMIT together with AGRA wants to champion a big program on what wheat in Africa would mean. But at the same time, we need to diversify the wheat and maize-based systems, especially those maize-based systems, with opportunity crops, like chickpeas, like millets, like sorghums. But those chickpeas, those millets may not be really adapted to the disease pressure we have today. They haven't benefited from using all the biodiversity that's there. Think about taro, how we can use that. And so we are championing young scientists. We just had a great conversation with a young female scientist working on taro with a VAX scholarship. So VAX is one of the programs where we are championing young scientists that can now work on those opportunity crops, but also take advantage of everything we have learned for wheat and maize improvement, for wheat and maize science, and we want to make those data systems, those experimental stations available for those opportunity crops, so that those opportunity crops become equally strong in resilience to climate, in resilience to disease pressures, so they become a real opportunity for farmers for their income, so she can make some money, so she can feed the family nutritiously, but also can have access to market opportunities.
Now let's talk about your work now, the works you do across the continent now in Senegal, Ghana, in Kenya, and the like. So walk us through how you've been able to scale down across these countries and how you look at doubling up, for other countries as you penetrate the African market.
Yeah, and I think what is very important to highlight there, we have been working very strong in Ethiopia, Kenya, but also had very strong projects in Zambia, Tanzania, Malawi. You made me remember from last year that it was actually getting up to speed. Today we have reached hundreds of thousands of farmers, up to 2.3 million beneficiaries in our big project in Tanzania, Zambia, Malawi, where we worked with climate smart practices and could actually distribute them throughout the agricultural ecosystem. Today we're very proud of being present, strong and growing in Senegal, in this part of Africa, and we want to do more, we want to do better, and we want to be the entry point of science and innovation for maize-based systems, but also beyond.
The event saw, among other deals reached, a strategic partnership between IKEA Foundation and SNV that will accelerate the integrated adoption of regenerative agriculture and the productive use of renewable energy. With an initial phase of 5 years for 45 million euros, we find out how this partnership will further a systemic change at the intersection of agri-food and renewable energy.
Well, both our organizations have been invested in the continent and helping advance development in the agricultural sector, in the energy sector. We have worked together in the past for many years, and now we have joined forces to really help advance resilient food systems that are growing based on renewable energy.
All right, now, Anne-Marie, talk to us now. What's the role of SNV in this partnership now? Looking at your track record over the years now, what is SNV bringing to the table?
Yes, well, I would like to emphasize that in this particular partnership, it's not SNV in the center of the partnership. It's the local partners, and I think that's what we will be bringing to the table, working with local organizations, local governments, investors, SMEs, smallholders. We have been working with those for several years in the countries we will be starting. So that's what we try to bring to the table, to be really an enabler.
Now let's look at how this partnership is going to fuel local farmers, particularly in East Africa. Now let's talk about the funding part of things right now. What are we looking at in terms of the partnership? What monies are we looking at on the table?
So the partnership has been kicked off and is kicking off today. And the program is running from 2025 until 2029. And the IKEA Foundation is providing an initial investment of 45 million. The hope, however, is that that 45 million is the beginning of a larger movement of funders and implementers, particularly local implementers, to come together to really invest in the intersection, in the work that connects regenerative agriculture and renewable energy.
All right, now talk to us about the adoption of these new models now, right now. How well do you think this will work in terms of penetration, in terms of agriculture in Africa?
Well, at this moment, only 1 out of 10 rural, smallholders in the 4 countries we are now starting is connected to on-grid energy provision. That means that 9 out of 10 not. And this partnership wants to connect working on one hand on regenerative agriculture, connecting it from the start, from its design, with productive use of renewable energies to really work on healthy soils, but also working on boosting productivity, but in an interconnected way, so that in the end, incomes for farmers will increase.
Well, let's break that down a little bit more further right now. We're looking at the adoption of renewable energy, proper use of renewable energy in terms of to aid farmers right now in these countries right now. But let's talk about how adoption is going to drive. What are you looking at in terms of adoption?
Just some examples. At this moment, there is a lot of post-harvest losses. When you have the right storage, for example, cold storage, you can reduce your loss, which improves the amount of produce you have to sell. So this is a very concrete example of how adoption could look like.
Right. Let me have you right now. And my question would be around the upside risk. You're bringing the capital, right, 45 million. And one thing that a lot of investors or a lot of partners will say in terms of investing in sectors that have been de-risked right now, peculiarities to certain issues, post-harvest losses, insecurity, lack of synchronized policies from the public sector. Now, how are you looking at in terms of the de-risked part of this partnership?
So the first thing I would say is that the role of a philanthropic organization is to absorb risk, right? So we are coming in, we are the first foundation that is funding this project. And we work with a number of, so SNV is our coordinator and our main lead for this project, but they also, as they said, they're working with lots of local entities. And that will include enterprise development entities like Acumen, or it will include potentially local financial institutions. And the trick is going to be to understand really the local context and understand what the needs of the market solutions are in that particular context, and then deploy capital towards that. But our hope, again, is that a 45 million euros is not going to solve the problem of food production and renewable energy in East Africa. So our hope is that with our stepping in, we can be showing the way and modeling how other foundations and how investors and how local financial institutions should be investing in that connection between renewable energy practices and technology and adoption and regenerative agricultural practices.
Okay, now that simplifies things now. But one area I would also want to ask is in terms of scaling. How are you looking to scale? You're currently in East Africa now. We know this is not a problem that's peculiar to only East Africa. Yes. It's also something very common in West Africa. Now, what are your plans in terms of scaling?
Well, we have ambitions, and I think the start is made in those 4 countries. Let's learn there. Let's learn from what goes well, what learns from what can be improved, and try to bring in partners also from, and start also in other countries. Also in West Africa, there are more and more countries with policies aligned around regenerative agriculture and productive use of renewable energy. So certainly there is a very fruitful grounds here also, here in Senegal or in any other countries to do this, but you have to start somewhere.
Quite succinctly said. Now, but another thing in terms of starting somewhere, now let's look at youth adoption right now. Over the years, and you've been working with local partners, local farmers, how well have you seen the adoption of youths? How well have you seen African youth embrace agriculture? And do you think with these new models of Pure and the likes will help drive that adoption?
Well, what we have seen with our partners, especially working with the connection between regenerative agriculture and productive use of renewable energies, is that it makes more interesting for youth entrepreneurs or youth farmers to get engaged because of the technology side, because of the market side, also being part of SMEs, being an entrepreneur. So it is also thinking out of the box when it comes to agriculture and the role of youth in it. And what we have seen so far is that youth is very eager to engage when it is a bit out of the traditional.
and quite said now. Let's also look at how IKEA is also driving this right now. It's not just for you. It's not just about providing the financing. It's about also making impact right now. So how does this cascade down to what IKEA's foundation is all about?
The IKEA Foundation has been a pioneer in advancing productive use of renewable energy, for instance. And we have worked with many partners, many of which are here in a summit that is focused on food and agriculture, because we see that productive use of renewable energy is a very big enabler for more resilient food systems. So this is another partnership that we are committed to, but this is a commitment that the foundation is looking to drive, and we are hoping in understanding that the majority of farmers are off-grid and that we need energy to produce income, that this is a place of investment for us that is going to continue to grow and that we'll continue to focus on.
From technological innovations to putting boots to the ground, these private sector players believe a lot more can be unlocked with the right investments and commitments at both the public and the private sector level.
Achieving a transformative food and agri-food system here in Africa is one that takes a painstaking effort. Painstaking effort not just from the government, but also from private sector players and development partners as well. But more importantly, is putting women and youth first in this transformation. Well, that's all we can take on this episode of Focus On as we put the spotlight on the 2025 Africa Food Systems Forum here in Dakar, Senegal. I'm Akin Obakeye. Until next time, it's bye for now.